This is the true story of a man sentenced to life in prison for a murder he didn't commit, and how he found peace, purpose, and even forgiveness inside a 6x9 cell. They stole his freedom. 17 years of silence, concrete walls, and a mother's unanswered prayers. Wouldn't you come out broken? But he didn't. He came out a teacher, a healer, and even helped the man who accused him get that golting and share for others to learn. It was a warm Sunday afternoon in Baltimore. The kind of day when grandmothers sit on porches and kids ride bikes without helmets, shouting over the music spilling out of open windows. Darnell James, 24, had just returned from his shift at the steel plant. He kissed his baby daughter on the cheek and settled into his worn recliner. That's when the knock came. 3 officers. No smiles, no questions, just handcuffs. "You're under arrest for the murder of Tyrese Coleman." I thought it was a mistake. I laughed. "Murder? Me? I'd never even held a gun," Darnell said. But Darnell's life unraveled in under 48 hours. An eyewitness placed him at the scene. The public defender barely reviewed his case. The jury was out for less than 3 hours. As the metal of the handcuffs tightened around his wrists, Darnell locked eyes with his girlfriend Tamika. She clutched their daughter, who began to cry. Not because she understood what was happening, but because her father was being taken away by men with cold eyes and guns at their hips. "What is this about?" Tamika shouted. "He didn't do nothing!" But the officers didn't flinch. They walked Darnell out like a ghost being erased in real time. Neighbors watched from behind curtains. Some shook their heads, others whispered, the kind of whisper that stains a man's name before a trial even begins. "They shoved me in the back of the cruiser like I was some animal. I kept asking, 'Where's the proof? Who said I did this?'" said Darnell. At the precinct, he sat alone for hours under fluorescent lights. No food, no lawyer, just silence and the buzz of a broken vending machine. When they finally brought him in to speak, the detective slid a single photo across the table. A young man's lifeless body in a pool of blood. Tyrese Coleman. Shot twice in the chest, outside a liquor store Darnell had never been to. An eyewitness claimed Darnell ran from the scene. "I told them I was at work. I punched out at 4:36. But my time card? They never brought it up. My manager wasn't even called." The court-appointed lawyer never challenged the timeline, never cross-examined the witness, never called a single character witness on Darnell's behalf. And in just 3 days, his world vanished behind bars. Prison isn't just physical, it's spiritual exile. Every day, Darnell woke up to the same routine: count, food, isolation. Time had no meaning, just days stacked on top of each other. He kept his mother's photo tucked inside a Bible she sent him. "Son, I still believe you," her last words before she passed, 2 years into his sentence. Darnell, say it loud. "I wasn't angry at the system. I was angry that I stopped believing I was innocent too." The prison walls didn't just keep Darnell in, they kept the world out. Birthdays passed without calls. Letters slowed, then stopped. The silence, he said, was the loudest part. He began to mark the days by the wear on his sneakers, pacing the tiny yard during his 1 hour of sunlight. He talked to no one, not even himself. The guards nicknamed him the Shadow, a man who moved but didn't speak. Grief doesn't always cry. Sometimes it just sits with you, like a weight on your chest you can't push off. One night during a power outage, he sat by the narrow window and whispered his mother's name. "Mama, if you're listening, I don't know if I'm still me." But even in that silence, a spark remained. A fragile ember, not of hope, but of memory. Something inside him refused to die, even when everything else did. Every day after lunch, Charles would draw rivers, trees, even faces, using only the stub of an orange crayon. He didn't talk much, except in riddles. Even broken clocks tell the truth twice a day. At first, Darnell thought Charles was just another man lost to the system. But the art had something raw, something sacred. One mural was of a boy holding a balloon in the middle of a storm. It stopped Darnell cold. Darnell said, "I saw myself in that kid. Lost in a world I didn't choose, still holding on to something that could float." That night, Darnell sat on his bunk, heart pounding, and picked up the pencil he hadn't touched in years. He wrote for hours his story, the timeline, the faces, the flaws. It was his first act of defiance in years, and he mailed it not to a friend, not to family, but to the Innocence Project. It was a small letter, but it carried 17 years of silence, loss, and quiet fire. When the email came, that single line, "We believe your case deserves a second look," Darnell read it 10 times. He stared at the screen like it was a portal to another life. For the first time in years, he felt time move again. The lawyers from the Innocence Project visited with clipboards, voice recorders, and compassion. They pored through trial transcripts, interviewed forgotten witnesses, tracked down timelines. The teenager who once pointed a finger at Darnell admitted he'd been pressured by detectives, scared, confused, and threatened with jail time himself. And the lab? The DNA on the weapon belonged to a man already serving time in a different state. 2 more years passed, 2 more birthdays behind bars, but something inside Darnell began to bloom again. Then the ruling came. Conviction vacated, charges dropped. Darnell said, "I didn't even feel the cuffs come off. I just remember the sun hitting my face, full and warm, like it hadn't in decades." Freedom didn't come with fireworks. It came with silence, a silence that no longer punished, but healed. Outside, Baltimore hadn't changed, but Darnell had. He stepped into a world that moved on without him. His daughter was now 21, pregnant with her own child. The kids who used to play ball in the street now leaned on walls, smoking silence. His old apartment was long gone. His name still showed up in search engines next to convicted murderer. Even family was complicated. His daughter, Nia, barely remembered the sound of his voice. She smiled politely when they met, but there was a wall between them built from birthdays missed, scraped knees he never kissed, and lullabies he never sang. "I'm glad you're out," she said, eyes cast downward. "Me too," he whispered, swallowing 1,000 unsaid apologies. Darnell said, thoughtfully, "I thought I'd come home to love, but I came back to the consequences of absence." He applied to dozens of jobs, warehouses, janitorial work, security, but the moment they saw his record, the smiles faded. Even in freedom, the cage followed him. And yet, every morning, he put on a clean shirt, walked to the bus stop, and refused to disappear, because surviving wasn't enough anymore. He needed to rebuild, piece by fragile piece. One evening, Darnell sat alone with a candle lit for his mother's birthday. That's when he did something unimaginable. He wrote a letter, not to a lawyer or a friend, but to the man who falsely accused him. Letter excerpt. Emotional. "I don't know why you said what you did," softly. "Maybe they scared you, maybe you were lost." Thoughtful. "I've been lost too. But I forgive you. Because holding anger is like drinking poison and hoping the other person dies. Not to injustice, but to peace." He folded the letter slowly, placed it in an envelope and stared at the name, Malik Thomas, the boy who'd pointed at him in court all those years ago. Darnell said, resolute, "I wasn't writing to heal him, I was writing to set myself free." He walked to the corner mailbox beneath the street lamp, the same one he used as a teenager to send love notes to Tamika. This time, it was a different kind of love, one that asked for nothing in return. The letter dropped through the slot with a hollow thunk, and for the first time in years, Darnell, without bitterness in his chest. That night, he didn't dream of prison bars or courtroom lies. He dreamed of a river, wide, orange, and flowing gently over the rocks. Darnell's voice, once silenced by prison walls, now echoed in gymnasiums, classrooms, and city halls. He didn't just speak, he moved people. He stood before teenagers on the edge of the same streets that once trapped him. "You don't have to go to prison to lose your freedom," he'd say. "Sometimes, believing you're not worth saving is worse." At police academies, cadets listened, some uneasy as he spoke about implicit bias, false assumptions, and the devastating weight of unchecked authority. He didn't accuse, he educated. Second Sunrise became more than a non-profit. It became a lighthouse. They helped exonerated men find housing, reunite with families, and apply for jobs across borders from Maryland to Montreal, from Lagos to Nairobi. Darnell said, "If we want justice to mean something, it has to reach farther than the courtroom. It has to follow us home." What began as a whisper from a cell block became a global call for reform, compassion, and resilience. And Darnell, he was no longer just a survivor. He was a builder of bridges between pain and healing, between truth and possibility. This isn't just Darnell's story. It's a reflection of millions whose names we may never know. It's about the prisons we build in our minds and the gardens we can still grow beyond them. You might be hurting, you might feel stuck, but healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing growth over bitterness. The garden isn't big, just a patch of earth behind a brick building, but it blooms like a miracle. Bright rows of tomatoes lean toward the sun, green peppers peek through leafy coats, and marigolds line the edges like golden sentinels. Every Saturday, young men gather there, some fresh out of juvenile detention, some trying to avoid going in. Darnell doesn't preach. He hands them seeds, tools, and trust. Darnell said, "I tell them, we're not just planting food, we're planting new stories." Each row becomes a lesson about roots, about resilience, about how some things take time, and that's okay. One boy, barely 16, asked, "You think we can grow trees here someday?" Darnell smiled, hands covered in soil. "One day, son. But first, we learn how to grow the ground that holds them." In the middle of the city, in a space no one once noticed, hope grows quietly, patiently, stubbornly. Not just for Darnell, but for everyone who was told they'd never bloom again. If this story moved you, don't let it stop here. Drop a comment sharing how this story touched you or someone you know. Like this video so more people hear stories that matter. Subscribe to NUP Stories for more true stories of justice, hope, and healing. Share this with someone who needs a second sunrise.